Trying to make more sense of your family business? Let's talk about it.
Welcome to another episode in the series, Making Sense of Family Business. I'm John Kempfield, the Family Business Solutionist, broadcasting from Melbourne in Australia. And today I'm talking about roles and responsibilities, boundaries, accountabilities, and authority. So it's a big spread of really doing stuff within families and within family businesses. We're talking about this because when you manage this stuff well, you give clarity and certainty to everybody who's involved in either the family or the business, and there's a reasonably good chance you're going to avoid getting yourself into trouble with conflicts and all the rest. If you don't manage it, it leads to all sorts of problems. And the whole point of this series is to help people involved in family businesses be more aware of the causes of conflict, be better at resolving those conflicts, putting things in place, so that they will be that 1 in 10 or less family businesses that enjoy peace and prosperity. Let's get to it. Let's start by talking about what exactly do we mean by roles, responsibilities, authorities, and accountabilities. And let's be very clear, they need to be mentioned in a single breath, and they often aren't. Frequently what I find is that a family business, even very large businesses, are not very good at having role clarity. They don't have good detailed job descriptions. They might have something that's canned, something provided by an HR consultant, which is just a bullet point task list or something of that sort. But very often they don't pay enough attention to providing the structure around roles and responsibilities that everybody else in the business needs, even if they don't. So it's not uncommon to find a business owner who says, I don't need a title. Everyone knows, what's going on here. And you talk to every single member of staff and they'll tell you, well, we know who the boss is, but we don't know exactly who we're reporting to, who we're accountable to, or what the precise roles of individuals are, because they move around quite a lot. Proper job descriptions tend to eliminate that problem. So the first thing we really need to do is be clear about what role people are in. What functional responsibilities do they have in the business? What are they actually there for? Are they running the accounts? Are they involved in marketing? Are they involved in production, operations, customer service? Whatever it may happen to be, and at what level do they sit there? So we need to be very clear what the roles are, and giving a label, like almost everything in management. Once you have a label, then you can provide a definition and you can measure things like performance. Without that, it becomes very difficult. Once you've identified what the role is, you need to be very clear what the responsibilities are in that role. Because if you can identify the responsibilities, you can measure the level of success in discharging those responsibilities, which is basically what performance is all about. So if somebody is in sales and they need to achieve certain targets, it's their responsibility, depending on what level they're at, to achieve those results. And if they don't, they should be held accountable for not achieving those results. Now, accountability is not, and it's often thought of as a very negative thing, I'm going to hold you to the Bunsen burner, I'm going to roast you until you squeal. That's not what it's about at all. The idea of accountability is we need to look at how well you've done and we need to respond accordingly. If you've achieved everything we wanted you to, we'll celebrate, we'll provide rewards. We may even consider promotion. But if you fail, that is damaging our family and maybe damaging our business. We need to know so that we can do something about it, because we want to succeed rather than fail. So accountability has to sit in with all of those responsibilities. Now, the other thing that needs to sit in there is authority, and this is something that family businesses are often not that good at doing. We'll often see this with a parent who will make a child responsible for doing something, but they won't give them the authority to actually make it happen, to manage their people, make decisions, and carry through with the plan, because the parents won't cede control, possibly because they still see the 38-year-old as a 16-year-old drunken teenager, and they don't give them the responsibility they need. So we need to put in clarity about roles, clarity about responsibilities, accountabilities, which is the measurement and the frequent reviews, and we must make sure that if we give people responsibility, we give them the authority to actually do something with it, or they're going to get frustrated and nothing is going to look serious. Now, if we put these things in place, we will have reasonable clarity, at least in the workforce, about who's who in the zoo and what they're supposed to do. That rhymes, doesn't it? If we don't have clarity, that is probably the most common single cause of conflict in a family business. Nobody knows who's doing what their roles are, what their responsibilities are, what are they supposed to do, not supposed to do, who are they supposed to do it with. That's very frustrating, seriously frustrating. So that's what we're looking at, is to produce clarity. And family businesses often grew on an informal basis. Dad maybe did, I'm going to go stereotypical here, Dad may have had the idea, he did the work, Mum quietly sat in the background, made everything happen, did the accounts, the admin and so on while they were getting going. Kids helped out when they could, and as they got older they bailed out, and then at some stage or another they might come back. But because the fundamental focus of the business is highly informal, a lot of family businesses are successful because they know exactly how to do what they do, but they find it very dangerous scaling up to a larger size because you spread the family too thin and you just can't control what's going on, and then mistakes really start to happen. Now, getting back to some of the stuff here, authority. It can be claimed and it can be earned. Earned authority is what you get when you've demonstrated competence and reliability, so you have earned the authority that you are given to continue to do stuff. Claimed authority is when you breeze in and you say, well, you start ordering people around on the basis you've claimed to have a certain authority, but you haven't necessarily had to earn it. Now, a lot of family businesses, they don't put a lot of emphasis on claimed authority because they want to be cute and cuddly and they don't want to get too difficult, or they go much too far in the other direction, at least for a founder, and they become despotic tyrants and so on, and they overclaim their authority. But what I mean is they don't look at claiming authority with the definition of what does that authority entail, role, responsibility, accountability, etc. And that's something that is going to come up when we talk about how do you avoid problems arising as a result. Another problem we have in this space is something called boundary confusion, where people who may have a position in the family, they may have the family name over the door of the business, and they claim that they have authority because they're a member of the family rather than because they have a specific role or because they have a specific competence. That's a problem. So that is part of the boundary confusion. Another piece of boundary confusion might be the family doesn't have any rules about not talking about the business over the dinner table. It's almost certainly true that a lot of kids learn to be entrepreneurs listening to their parents. At the same time, it's a good idea to have a degree of separation where the business stays in the business, the family stays in the family, and the two support each other, but they don't trespass on each other's turf, because then you have no home life and you get confused businesses. We're making out the case that everybody gets confused and becomes demotivated if there's a lack of clarity about who's doing what. So let's have a look at the family business roles. Within a family business, family members can have a bunch of roles. They can be a family member, in other words, they're not part of the business. They can be an owner, and owners do not belong on org charts as owners. They might well be working in the business and have particular roles as the manager of this or head of something or other else. But that is not a role as an owner, that's a role as a business executive. It's really important to make that distinction. They might be a leader, they might be a manager, they might be an employee. Those are the roles they might have in the business. So there's a bunch of different roles, and what family businesses need to do probably better a lot of the time is be very clear of how they fit people into roles that serve the business effectively. A lot of family businesses build roles around the people they've got rather than around the functions that they need, and that is not great business thinking. Now, there are quite a few causes of conflict sitting within this whole thing that we're talking about. One of the first ones is sheer entitlement. When you get a family member who may or may not contribute adequately, feels entitled to respect and responsibility and authority simply because they're a family member, not because they have earned the right to have that. That can create a lot of problems, and particularly when somebody bowls in and it creates a perception of glass ceilings and the like, you can really piss a lot of good staff off by doing something like that. You often get a conflict between working or non-working family members, where for some strange reason people who don't work in the business and have had freedom to pursue their own careers claim the people who went into the business had an easy ride on the way through, and now after 30 years of devotion they shouldn't be entitled to take over the running of the business. And sometimes they're right, they probably shouldn't. But it's a strange conflict where, as people begin to realise that dad's or mum's not going to go on forever, they start to get jealousy about the other people in the business, even though they've got a very good career out of the business. Spouses can be wonderful allies. I always look for spouses and partners to work with me as allies when we have a family member who's suffering a great deal of conflict and we need to help them get different perspectives on life. The spouses and partners can be wonderful allies, reinforcing everything we do back when they're back at home, or they can be enormous white antas, undermining the work that's being done with the family because they haven't been engaged in that work and they're only getting a cockeyed view of what decisions are being made, what problems are being solved, and so forth. So you need to look at the spouses, you need to try and turn them into allies, and be careful if they are actually destroying and undermining whatever work you might be trying to do to get clarity into the business. It's a good idea in a business to have some very clear policies about spousal engagement. We'd normally say within a family constitution, every employee family member should have a financial binding agreement, prenuptial, postnuptial, whatever you want to call it. They should have a policy about whether or not spouses are entitled to work in the business, and if they are entitled to work in the business, on what basis would you bring them in? If you create the policy for these things in advance, you don't have to deal with them in a conflict environment when somebody's really pushing hard and it hasn't been dealt with. So you don't have a process that you can actually follow when it actually comes live. That makes life difficult. It's not a bad idea to create a roles and responsibilities matrix where you look at where do people sit in the family, in the ownership, in the business decision making, and so forth. It provides a focus for conversations, clarifies in people's minds what is working, and it also gives a good basis for developing policies about employment. In all of this, we're being very cognizant of the fact there are, in a family business or a business family, there are three systems operating. There's the system for the individuals, there's a system for the family, which is collective, and then there's the commercial system for the business, which has needs and interests that are very different to those of the family members. So reconciling those becomes an important activity. We need to think of accountability as an attitude. It's a state of mind. You can do all the pontificating you like, you can create all the rules and guidelines, policies, etc. But if you don't have people with the right attitude, they won't hold themselves accountable, they won't be held accountable, and families are not great at holding their family members accountable. For some reason they feel that's demeaning or embarrassing, don't like doing it in front of others. Now, what we ideally are looking for if we want a high-performing business is what is called a culture of accountability as opposed to a culture of blame. Culture of accountability says our people are our most important assets. They are the people who solve our problems. They are the people who make things work. We need to hold them accountable. We need them to hold each other accountable. And if we do that, we should have a well-integrated, high-functioning team. A culture of blame is one that assumes right from the start people are the problem. And people do not do what they should do all the time. Therefore, we don't look to the problem, we look to the people to blame for not achieving the results we're looking for. We don't learn so much with a culture of blame, we just blame. Whereas accountability is looking at, I didn't do that as well as I could have done. What can I learn from that so I can do it better next time around? That's a very, very short way of talking about it. There's much more in the book about it. It's a very, very important concept and very valuable to apply as learnings, which can be put in a single page, and it becomes a really powerful tool for reshaping and upgrading a company and a family business culture. I hope I've made it clear that descriptive titles in a family and in a business have very real power. If we can name it, it's a bit like the old voodoo stuff. You put a name on something and you can control it. Well, that works in business and it certainly works in families as well. So just to finish off, if we were to look at having 5 golden rules for dealing with issues of responsibility, roles, accountability, authority, and so forth, I would call them this. Number 1, separate the family from the business for all important decisions. That is fundamental to the whole family business best practice model, the separation of the family from the business so they can mutually support each other from a distance. Number 2, define your roles in the business along functional lines. What does the business need to do what it's doing? What does it need to be able to grow to where it wants to go? And do we have people who are at least 80% capable of filling those roles right now? Because if not, we probably need to do some recruiting. 3, establish strong and effective governance structures. In the business, you want a family council, you want a family constitution, you want to have some family policies. You probably also want to have family forums, so at least once a year the family gets together, and you can then communicate, you can work through things, you can deal with problems, and you can leave a paper trail just in case it all turns to custard further down the track. Item 4, nurture a culture of accountability. Do not become a culture of blame. Very easy to blame people. You go down the slippery slope, things don't get better, they get worse. And item number 5, focus on relationships. Work to keep relationships in the family healthy because, as a lot of people will tell you, if the family isn't healthy, it's very hard to have a healthy family business. Communication, lots of communication in itself is not enough. Communication doesn't do anything. It's what underpins that at a relationship level that makes the communications positive or negative. And if we use communication as a litmus test, we can say there's clearly something going on here, but communication itself is like a rifle. It doesn't do anything by itself. You've got to pick it up and use it. If you found this useful, please give us a like. Please let others know who may be interested. And I hope to see you back next week. From Jonk, the Family Business Solutionist, thank you for watching.